Imagine this scenario. You go to check your bank, maybe look up a recipe, or just ping a friend. You click, the page kind of starts loading, and then poof, nothing. Just hangs there. Blank screen. It's not your internet connection, probably not your phone, and the website itself is actually down. What if you were hitting like an invisible digital wall, one that lets a tiny trickle of data through maybe 16 kilobytes, and then silently cuts you off? Well, that's a reality for a lot of people trying to use the internet from Russia, right? Experts calling it 16 kb wall. It seems to have started around June 9th, 2025. Connections are being deliberately throttled, cut off after that tiny data limit, making most modern websites just unusable. So today on the Deep Dive, part of the Beyond Global Wave series, NEXUS-IBA, we're taking an urgent look. We want to understand what's really going on, why this kind of systematic throttling is a big deal for global information flow, and importantly, what people are doing to try to put back. Our mission, as always, is exploring these critical issues around access to information.
And you're absolutely right. This is way more than just a minor inconvenience. It's definitely large scale, it's deliberate, and it's being rolled out by several major Russian internet service providers, the ISP. We've been tracking it specifically since that June 9th date. For users on the ground, it's incredibly frustrating. A website might look like it's starting to load, you might see the tab title appear, but then it stalls out, it looks broken. Or maybe you get a timeout error eventually. But the key thing to grasp here is, this isn't a technical fault, it's not a server issue, it's calculated interference designed specifically to disrupt access, making the wider internet seem unreliable or dysfunctional from within Russia.
Okay, so let's really unpack this invisible wall. What's happening, technically speaking? How does this tiny 16 kilobyte limit manage to, well, break the internet experience so effectively?
Yeah, it's quite, insidious is a good word for it. The mechanism involves silently resetting the connection. It doesn't send an error back, it just drops it. And this happens after a very specific, very small amount of data get through usually the first 10 to 14 TCP packets. Now, depending on the packet size and overheads, that works out to roughly 16 kilobytes.
18 kilobytes, that's almost nothing in modern web terms.
Exactly. Think about it. Your browser asks for a web page. The server sends back maybe the first little bit, the absolute basic HTML structure, maybe a tiny logo file, and then bang, connection, gone. Silently. The rest of the page, all the images, the scripts that make it interactive, the style sheets that make it look right, they just never arrive.
Okay, and this isn't just hitting old websites or something. It affects everything.
That's what's particularly concerning. This isn't targeting specific types of content. It seems to be applied across the board, hitting all the major internet protocols we rely on today. So whether it's standard web traffic, HTTP 1 over TCP, or the newer, more secure connections like HTTP2 running over TLS encryption, or even the very latest HTTP 3 over QUIC. They're all getting it.
Even encrypted traffic. So things like TLS 1.3 don't protect you.
No, because the block happens so early based on the amount of data, not the content. It reset the underlying connection itself before most of the encrypted application data has even had a chance to flow. So encryption doesn't bypass this specific type of throttle.
And do we know who's doing this? Which providers?
Well, the reports have identified several key Russian ISPs, the big name, Rostelecom, Megafon, Vimpelcom, MTS, and also MGTS in Moscow. And the impact is definitely measurable. We're seeing reports indicating a significant drop in overall internet traffic coming out of Russia. Some figures suggest over 30%.
Wow.
Yeah, a drop that large tells you this isn't isolated. It's having a really widespread effect on connectivity.
So let's bring this back to the user. If you're in Russia trying to get online, what does this feel like? You're not seeing a big blocked by government page where you're just clicking a link, maybe seeing that loading spinner go round and round forever, or just getting a mostly blank page, perhaps.
That's exactly it. Blank pages, endless loading spinners, maybe just the very top navigation bar of a website loading and nothing else. It creates this frustrating, broken experience. And the result is effectively cuts people off from huge amounts of information, not just news sites, but social media, collaboration pools, educational resources, even, basic online services that we take for granted. It's not an outright block, but the systematic degradation, it makes large parts of the global internet practically unusable. It fosters the sense of, informational isolation.
Okay, now when we talk about making the internet work smoothly and securely, especially globally, one company looms large. Cloudflare. Can you give us a sense of just how big a player Cloudflare is?
Oh, Cloudflare is absolutely fundamental to the modern internet infrastructure. They provide a couple of key services. One is a content delivery network. That means they cache copies of website content on servers all around the world, physically closer to users to make website load much faster. The other big thing is DDoS protection, distributed denial of service. They shield websites from massive floods, malicious traffic designed to knock them offline, and their scale is just enormous. Estimates vary, but it's often cited that Cloudflare handles traffic for something like 20% of the entire web. That includes a lot of Russian websites and international sites accessed from Russia. They're a huge part of plumbing.
Right. So what has Cloudflare said about the 16 kb wall? Are they affected? Can they fix it?
They've been quite open about it, actually. They confirmed pretty quickly that, yes, this throttling is happening and it's being applied by the local Russian ISPs. Crucially, they stated it's outside of Cloudflare's control.
Huh.
They put out a statement that was very direct. I think I have the quote here.
Yeah.
We are unable at this time to restore reliable, high-performance access to Cloudflare products and protected websites for Russian users in a lawful manner.
In a lawful manner. That phrasing seems really significant.
It is. It implies they could potentially try technical workarounds, but doing so within the current Russian legal or regulatory environment is possible for them. It's a very carefully worded statement. They also mentioned they've received no official communication from the Russian government explaining why this is happening or what the directive is. It's all happening without formal explanation.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. If a company like Cloudflare, with all their technical expertise, their global infrastructure, whose whole business is making the internet work, if they say they can't lawfully fix this from their end, What does that tell us about the nature of this challenge? This isn't just a tech problem anymore, is it?
Absolutely not. It signals a really significant escalation. This isn't something you can just hat or reroute easily if the ISPs themselves are the ones applying the restriction at a fundamental network level. And to hammer that point home, this isn't just about Cloudflare, even though they're a huge target. We're seeing reports confirming that other major Western hosting providers are also being affected by similar throttling.
Like who?
Companies like Hetzner in Germany, OVH in France, even DigitalOcean based in the US. It suggests a coordinated strategy targeting multiple key providers of Western internet structure.
So it's systematic.
Very much so. It points towards a deliberate effort to degrade access to a wide range of services hosted outside Russia, not just one specific company. This isn't random. It's targeted infrastructural interference.
Which inevitably brings us to the why. This clearly isn't a glitch. So what's the bigger picture here? What's the strategic goal behind deploying something like this 16 kb wall?
Well, officially, there's silence from the Kremlin. No public statements explaining the move. But based on the technical evidence and fitting it into Russia's established digital policies over the last decade or so, it points very strongly towards a deliberate act of censorship. It looks like a major step in advancing Russia's long-term strategy for a so-called sovereign internet, or RUNET. The idea is to gain much tighter control over information flows within Russia's border.
And what are the goals of that? What does a sovereign internet achieve for them?
There seem to be two main objectives here. First, reducing technological dependence on the West. By making Western services unreliable or unusable, it pushes Russian citizens and businesses toward domestic alternative services hosted within Russia, which are, frankly, much easier for this to monitor and control. Second, and perhaps the more critical goal, is to progressively isolate the population from foreign information. Blocking specific news sites is one thing, but degrading access to the infrastructure that hosts them, that's far broader. It aims to prevent the easy circulation of independent news, critical viewpoints, maybe even coordination of protests or dissent that might challenge state narrative.
You mentioned this isn't just content block. Can you expand on that? You call it infrastructural censorship.
Exactly. Traditional censorship often focuses on content blocking stiff URLs, filtering keywords, taking down pages. The 16 kb wall tactic operates at a lower level, at the network infrastructure level. It doesn't care what you're trying to access, just that you're trying to access enough data from certain target networks. It impacts the basic accessibility and interoperability of the internet itself. Think of it like, instead of putting up a roadblock on one specific highway off-ramp, they're damaging the highway itself, making it hard to get anywhere efficiently.
And does this also affect things like VPNs? People often use those to get around blocks.
That's another likely goal, yes. While a VPN encrypts your traffic, it still needs a stable underlying connection function. If the ISP is throttling or resetting all connections to VPN servers hosted outside Russia after 16 kb, it makes the VPN itself incredibly slow or completely unusable. It's a way to attack the circumvent tools indirectly by crippling the network path they rely on.
So let's talk about the real-world impact. For an ordinary person in Russia or a small business trying to operate, what does this mean day to day? We're not just talking about slow YouTube videos, right?
No, it's far more fundamental. Think about essential online services. Online banking often involves multiple small data exchanges with servers for authentication, checking balance, processing transactions. If those connections keep getting reset, basic banking becomes incredibly frustrating, maybe impossible. Or mapping app. They constantly pull small bits of data traffic updates, location information often from external APIs, servers hosted elsewhere. If those connections fail, your map becomes static, useless for navigation.
What about businesses?
For businesses, especially any involved in e-commerce or using international cloud services for, say, customer relationship management or logistics, it's potentially crippling. APIs they rely on to connect different systems, payment gateways, shipping calculators might start failing randomly. It leads to a massive loss of productivity. It makes collaboration with international partners quite difficult. And overall, it just deepens that informational isolation, cutting them off from global market tools.
Okay, so we have this sophisticated, almost invisible barrier being erected. Sounds quite bleak. But are there ways around it? Are individuals or organizations finding ways to navigate or, bypass this digital curtain?
Well, human ingenuity in the face of censorship is always pretty remarkable. On the side of website operators, services are being blocked. Some clever workarounds are being tried. For example, the company managed server mentioned they helps clients by setting up what's called reverse proxy, but with a twist involving port forwarding.
How does that work? Simply.
Essentially, they set up an intermediary server, like an invisible middleman, on a network not being throttled. They mentioned using an Italian network, Aruba Cloud, for instance. Traffic from Russia goes to this unaffected server first, and that server then fetches the actual content from the original server, which might be behind the 16 kb wall, and relays back. To the Russian ISP, it just looks like traffic to the Italian server, not the original one. It's a way to route around the...
Clever. But that helps website owners. What about individuals just trying to access information?
For individuals seeking uncensored news and perspectives, one surprisingly resilient option is actually quite old tech: shortwave radio.
Shortwave.
Absolutely. Its huge advantage is that it completely bypasses local internet and telecom infrastructure. Shortwave signals travel vast distances through the atmosphere. They can't be easily blocked or throttled by an ISP. This means you can tune in to international broadcasters directly, the BBC World Service, Voice of America, Deutsche Welle, Radio France Internationale, Radio Free Asia, and also, importantly, independent broadcasters like European Gospel Radio and NEXUS-IBA's own partner stations via IRS. It's a lifeline for news when the digital paths are compromised.
That's fascinating. Using old tech bypass new censorship. Now, speaking of NEXUS-IBA, you mentioned their commitment to free information flow. They apparently developed a technology called WorldDirector way back. What's the story there, and could it be relevant today?
Yes, WorldDirector has interesting roots. It actually originated back in 1995, developed by NEXUS-IBA. The initial driver was a need to ensure reliable, high-quality audio streaming for UN and UNESCO programs, getting their messages out globally, even to places with difficult network conditions. Conceptually, it was designed a bit like how a cellular network or maybe FM radio works. Instead of relying on one central server, it uses a network of distributed edge servers positioned closer to the end user. It intelligently routes traffic to provide the best, most reliable connection. It was built for resilience start.
Okay, so it's kind of like a CDN, but maybe with a different philosophy. How might that help against something like the 16 kb wall?
Well, its design principle offers potential advantage. First, it was always designed for transparency and ease of end users don't need special software plugin. It works across platform protocols. Second, that focus on reliability. The system constantly measures network condition, its nodes, and it can dynamically route traffic around problematic parts of the network, automatically ignoring servers or paths that are slow. This built-in resilience could potentially help navigate around throttle points.
Does it improve performance too?
Yes, that's another core feature. By serving content from closer, better connected edge servers and optimized routes, it's designed to accelerate content delivery. NEXUS-IBA claimed to make page load up to 4 times faster, and faster loading potentially help push more critical data before a low kbyte limit, though that depends on the throttling. And it's efficient. It was designed to reduce bandwidth for the end user, claim savings of %, and also less load on the website.
And what about reliability, like if servers go down?
That's built in too. It has inherent disaster recovery and redundancy features. Because it's distributed, if one edge server fails, traffic can be instantly rerouted to others. It can be configured for continuous service, even with primary server failures. So in a scenario where infrastructure is being deliberately degraded, a resilient, distributed, and intelligent delivery network like WorldDirector, which is now managed by Milano Ventures, LTD could represent a valuable alternative pathway for getting content through, helping to circumvent these kinds of blockages.
So it seems NEXUS-IBA is involved on multiple fronts here, supporting traditional methods like shortwave via IRS, but also having developed this potentially relevant CDN technology, WorldDirector. It's about keeping those information channels open however possible.
Exactly. It highlights the need for a multi-pronged approach. Whether it's leveraging established robust technologies like shortwave or exploring innovative digital distribution methods, the goal is to maintain access to information, even when governments actively try to control or censor the media. It's about enabling that free sharing of content.
So let's recap. This 16 kb wall isn't glitch. It's a new, quite sophisticated form of digital censorship merging, and it works by silently degrading internet access, subtly breaking connections after a tiny amount of data, rather than putting up an obvious block page. It makes much of the modern web frustratingly unusable and fundamentally challenge the idea of free and open global.
And the fact that even a giant like Cloudflare acknowledges they can't lawfully fix it from their end really underscores this. We're moving towards infrastructure-level troll tactics that are much harder to circumvent than simple website blocks about trolling pipes.
Which leaves us with a provocative thought as we face this era of, let's call it, infrastructural censorship. When access can be subtly broken, not just blocked, what does that mean for the future of global connectivity for all of us? And just how critical will the work of organizations dedicated to digital freedom, exploring everything from shortwave radio to advanced CDNs, be shaping that future for you, the global internet user? Something to think about. We encourage you to consider the implications of the 16 kb curtain, not just in Russia, but globally, and maybe look into the work of groups like NEXUS-IBA, who are fighting to keep information flowing freely.